Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Mastuma Viddishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So this is a prayer for teachers and students. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May our study be filled with vigor and enthusiasm. May we generally be illumined from our studies. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. And peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we begin as usual. This is the Vedanta Series question and answer. The idea is if you have no questions, there are no answers. So I'll pause for a while you can gather your thoughts and present a question.
Could you say something about Purna fullness?
You want me to talk about myself?
Or their self? Fullness. Somehow it connects with the idea of completeness and incompleteness, and with a person trying to live in accordance with that, while at the same time we're obviously individuals.
You see, our view of the world is necessarily fragmented. It is not full. There are moments of fullness and moments of emptiness. Just like we find in an ocean, there are hollows and peaks everywhere. There are gaps. There are black holes in the universe that have to be filled. So we live in a universe that has very limited interpretation and way of looking at it. So it comes to mind, I've told the example quite frequently, that Stephen Hawking, when he was alive, wanted to illustrate the idea of fullness and the idea of gaps, a lack of it. He took the Cambridge Hall, one of the famous halls, all wood floored, and he filled it with ball bearings. And with those ball bearings, what do you think happened? Nothing moved, because every sphere fits nicely into each other. There are no doubt some interstitial gaps, but so tightly packed are they that it's impossible to move. Only when you take one or two or three out do things start to float around and shift. The universe necessarily has to be something like that, otherwise it doesn't function. We have to have a universe with some incompleteness. We have to have an unbalanced universe. If it wasn't like that, we would have nothing. So while in the laboratory, you can find something like matter and antimatter. It's not difficult to produce it. When you have these big hydrogen, these big colliders, hadron colliders, smashing particles, then what comes out in the fallout is appearing particles and disappearing particles, and both smashing and annihilating each other and leaving a mark in their wake, which we can try and make some sense of. At the rock bottom of the whole universe is a kind of fullness. John Wheeler, the great physicist, he coined the term something like a foam, quantum foam. What he imagined was something like a fizzy drink, I suppose. And those people in Ireland will be familiar with that very dark drink called Guinness. If you look at it, you have to wait until all the bubbles form and coalesce and make a big head on the surface. But those bubbles will also fall down as well. So rising and falling, appearing and disappearing, is the fundamental nature of our universe. We don't see it like that. We're not designed to see it like that. If we saw it like that, then there'd be no husband, wife, and teenager. We have to have a vision that is restricted to the way we interpret the universe in front of us, and that is fivefold. 5 objects of the universe, 5 senses that gather the information in, and a processing system called the mind that sends out a message. This is how we should act. But further to that, of course, we think that there is this unit called a body that also is not full. That fullness that we are looking for is a kind of perfection. And we all have the urge to move toward it, but we find hollows. These hollows are called desires. And the desire is something that moves you forward, something like a king. A king moving forward, followed by a prime minister. The king is a king of desires. We want to fill all the gaps in and make a fullness. Not finding it anywhere, we want to have it. But it is the way that we look. Supposing now you tell me that there are 7 continents. But then supposing I'm a huge giant, something like Gulliver's Chariot man with the Lilliputians and so on, and I stand in the ocean, and the ocean comes up to my ankles. So big am I. Then I ask, where are these 7 continents? I wriggle my toes in the mud, and I find some solid land. When I see the bumps in the distance, mountains, continents, formerly called continents, now called one landmass. There's only a oneness and a wholeness. And so logic alone tells us that if we want to come to the final conclusion of investigation, there has to be only one thing left. In chemistry, Swami Vivekananda says, if I find that element from which all the other elements come, I've come to the end of the road with chemistry. Now, the search in physics is to find that same thing. What is that one thing? What are the building blocks of life? But when we look for building blocks, we're still looking for fragments and not from that one source, that single source from which everything comes. And in very comprehensive lectures, Swami Vivekananda points out that if you make an investigation and come to the highest generalization possible, in increasing steps of generalization and subtlety, then we come to that thing from which everything comes. And so the ancient investigators of this, that we can call rishis, they discovered some single source, just as we easily find and can verify evidence of the world in front of us. These ancient rishis just as easily found the world of spirit and managed to convey that in scripture. And it is up to us then, if we want to find this level of fullness on the spiritual level. On the physical level, we have to study physics. On the psychological level, we have to study, is there one kind of thing, something called solipsism? Is there one mind from which everything comes? Is there one consciousness? Erwin Schrödinger, in his lectures, What is Life?, that came out as a book in 1943 in Dublin. He took up residence in Dublin. Running away from the Nazi occupation in Germany, he took up residence in Ireland and gave a series of lectures. A great physicist with this one question mark, what is life? Thinking that there must be some single cause and source, and he came up with a remarkable statement, consciousness can never be a plural. It has to be a singular, one thing, one consciousness. And in those series of lectures, he also remarkably predicted the construction of a DNA. He didn't call it DNA, of course, but he was on the right track, predicting way, way before the genetic structure and the genome was discovered, and the geography was known, and the building blocks were known. But it doesn't really answer the ultimate question. So we only see what is in front of us, but the rishis saw some wholeness somewhere. And with us in mind, us means non-rishis in mind, decided to try to put this somehow as a hypothesis. That is called scripture. And scripture has no value unless there's also a method that goes with it. Please tell me how to get there. Now, we understand this world in front of us. That's a unit. The body we register as a unit as well. But actually, there's an internal unit. And that contains all our desires to fill the gaps and make a wholeness somewhere, a fullness. And in our search to do that, we think that we will be fulfilled if we follow these desires. In other words, we feel a hollow in here, inside, and we try to fill it from outside, called desire. And many desires we have. Some of an obvious nature, desire for food and clothing and shelter, but others are much more subtle. A desire to be loved, a desire to feel worthwhile, a desire to be praised, a desire to achieve. And when we do the Enneagram, we find all these desires come out in all the numbers. A desire to feel needed, a desire to feel peaceful. A great world desire is to feel peaceful. And yet we don't get it anywhere, so the desire continues. And so, if the royal king is a desire that propels you onwards, is there something that propels you once this body has gone? These desires get sustained and move on. So these rishis were talking and discovered something called Sukshma Sharira, subtle body. Subtle body has 12 components. We can say all the organs, that is, those that are not physically bound, are all operating internally. 5 organs of information are there, 5 organs of action, reaction. That makes 10. Then we have the intellect, and we have the mind. 12 components are there, and they move forward. And the intellect moves after the desires. The sense organs and the mind are all involved in desires. They're moving forward like a royal procession. So the king is there leading a royal procession. I want to desires, come, 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 let's try and fulfill them. And a prime minister called the intellect is following afterwards. And that whole thing is called personality. This personality survives us. And all looking for some fulfillment, not finding it with this body, naturally it moves on, tries to get something more, tries to get another suitable environment, the driving force of desires. When we talk about multiple lives, we're simply talking about the perpetuation of an unfulfilled personality that wants and seeks this fulfillment, doesn't seem to get it, and nature says, never mind, fulfill your desires anyway. Once you run dry, once you have no more desires, then your attention can turn to what the rishis discovered as spirit, and there you'll find fullness. Because that is the ultimate ocean, that is the ultimate source. That is the one thing without a second from which everything else comes. See, the Bhagavad Gita will tell us that. In the 20th stanza of the chapter 2, it will tell us, Na jayate mridiyate va karachin, na yam bhutta bhavita va na bhuyaha. It, what it? This source that is fulfilled, that is already fullness itself, is never born. Not like a body is born. And the thrust of it, subtle body, also is never born. Please mute your mic. And it doesn't die. So what is our familiar world? Being born and dying. And we can verify it, and we can verify everything in front. In this same way, can we scientifically verify the hypothesis of fullness that sits behind. Coming into being and ceasing, they don't happen in it. Something that is full is always full. That's why I tell you that in modern speak, when people try to be positive, even the word is awkward. Trying to be positive means it's negative. Trying to be positive, trying to do anything means the possibility of failure. So don't use that word try. Either you do it or you don't do it. Don't try. No, you'll succeed. Don't try. So this effort for fulfillment and finding it will result in no more impetus to look for it. There's no coming into being, and there's no ceasing to be. None of these take place in this fullness area called Atma. It is what? Nitya. It is unborn. It is eternal. Nitya, eternal. It is unborn. It is ceasing. It is eternal. It is changeless. And it's ever itself. And it's not killed when the body is slain. This is Sri Krishna trying to convince Arjuna that the body alone is not enough. There is more. There is a fullness somewhere. And that's why I was continuing to tell that the positive thinking people say, an optimist is somebody with the glass half full. Another one says, a pessimist says, half empty. But these ancient rishis say, nonsense. The glass is full and overflowing always. Yesterday in the Havan associated with the Kali Puja, it is our custom to give a Brahmin, that is, somebody who has a lineage of a dedicated life. So you give a tumbler or a vessel overflowing with rice. Rice represents abundance. It's overflowing. So what is this fullness? It means it's never empty. You'll never come to the end of it. And those people who say at the end of it is emptiness, ex nihilo, made from nothing and going to nothing, they don't understand. No, the Vedantic position from the ancient sages, discussed in the scriptures, tried to understood by us, practiced by us through regular disciplines, will result in fullness, not emptiness, not shunya. In a discussion with Buddhists, you may come across this idea. No, even the ocean can be emptied. If you are making this comparison of an ocean, even the ocean can be emptied. You can't empty even if you empty the ocean, you'll get sand. Something will always be there. If you say I'm existing and existent, existence must be our foundation base. Logic alone will tell us that we are existent. This ultimate is called Sat Chit Ananda, existence, knowledge and bliss. Existence, consciousness and bliss. You can't get conscious entities. Every organic species is conscious. Even a tree is conscious, a flower is conscious. Jagadish Chandra Bose investigated in a thorough way the sensitivity in plants. He understood now plants also have feelings. Plants have intelligence. We are living in a sentient universe. But the actual material, chemicals, the dull matter is not sentient. The comparison is like a spider that manifests a web from itself. This universe has come from one source. Now, what is the difference between the spider and the web? You can poke the web and it bounces. As it's supposed to do. It doesn't fight back, it doesn't run away, it doesn't attack you. But in the corner is a spider. You poke the spider, it runs. Or if you're sensitive, you'll run. One of the two will happen. But the spider is a sentient thing. The web is insentient. Oh, what is this warp and weave that we call a universe? They're like a fabric. Same language I was saying last night is used in Einstein's relativity, general relativity, to do with time and space. And he says it's a time-space continuum and is like the fabric of space-time, he calls it. What is gravity? Mass impinging on this fabric of space-time. So at the fundamental, physics level, at the very lowest levels of understanding physics, some people will lay out something like a trampoline and say, please stand on it, or put a heavy ball on it, heavy weight on it. And we see there's a depression. And with that depression, you put something on it, it will circle. So the earth is circling the sun because it's making a depression, as it were. It's curving, in other words, space-time. So there's a fabric here like that. There's an insentient aspect to it. But what is the thing that makes it all work by its very presence? It must be full, manifesting like this. So it is unborn. You and I are born, everything is born, bodies are born, and it is eternal, it is beyond time, and it is changeless. So every change that you register does not come into this category. So fullness has to be along these lines. Now that Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachite, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnamavashishyate explains it very well. From the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it tells fullness is not a confined thing. You can't put it in a box. You can't determine whether it's acid or alkaline. Fullness is fullness. There's nothing more to say about it. So you can't add to it. You can't take away from it. It is always the same. And that's what we are seeking. Now, is it here with us already? According to this passage, it's here already. Because our fundamental nature is that fullness. And it can never be born. It is never born. It never dies. It's coming into being and ceasing. So when people say, do you reincarnate? The question is posed like that. The answer should be, not at all. I'm not born. I don't die. You see the standard answer to a question. Do you believe in reincarnation? No, I don't believe in this incarnation. Why should I believe in another one? But there is something that moves over. This is called the subtle body. And it's not killed when the body is slain, that kind of thing. So the subtle body that operates. This subtle body, comprised of these 12 components, is there. And it's a useful hypothesis to note. Why is it useful? Because if it is so, then we should spend our whole life following the disciplines laid out in scripture and experiencing this for ourselves, because what it means is we will get fulfillment. Fulfillment means happiness. It's the same thing. If I feel fulfilled, I feel content, I feel happy. A search for happiness being there, a search for perfection being there, having found everything, I'm fulfilled, I'm satisfied. You eat a nice meal, you say, I feel satisfied. But you're not satisfied forever because you get hungry again. All the energy which is there, wound up in food, is now unwound and dispensed as energy. Is it something like that? All matter, all energy will be expended. So, what is this thing? There's a wonderful book from the author, the mystic Emmett Fox. Says this: power through constructive thinking is the chapter, or is the book actually. And he writes in the chapter on life after death. He says, the actual truth is that there is no death. If there's no death, there's no life. Life and death are two sides of the same coin. When a person seems to die, see the language selected carefully, all that happens is that he leaves the body here and goes over on to the next plane, otherwise unchanged. He falls asleep here to wake up on the other side, minus his physical body, but enriched with the knowledge that he has not died. Falling asleep is something what do we do? We're slipping out. We're slipping out of the subtle body. With the subtle body, we're slipping out of the physical body. And when we have in the text this idea, Sukshma Sharira, subtle body, the writer, like many others, this writer I just quoted, will have a different name. Just call it the etheric body, that's all. During the waking state, these two bodies remain together. But when they are separated, slipping into a coma or into under the effects of anesthetic or slipping into a dream, these are the ways that we experience less and less of the physical body, more and more of the subtle body. So that carries through, and all our impressions are feeding into it. These impressions, with all these desires, these subtle impressions, technically called samskaras, they're all slipping out, and this is called sleep. Now, if we do it in trance, we're doing it in the most beneficial way. But it is why the personality, the whole personality, survives death. Because it resides in this etheric field, in this subtle field, the subtle body, and remains. So the physical body, the normal waking state, is there, connected by what this author calls a silver cord. A slim connection. When we sever it, then we bury the body or we cremate the body, we do away with it. It's decomposing, but subtle body remains. So this subtle body also is not full. It still carries away all the feelings of I'm not fulfilled, and carries away all the impressions and desires with you. What happens, out of your interest, is a very useful reference. We find it in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, a very big, large Upanishad with many, many important things within it. Is there some kind of function of the subtle body? Yes, to fulfill desires. So this gives some very interesting details. The reference will be like this. We can go to a fourth chapter, fourth section, second stanza. Actually, that is not the reference. Yeah, it is. Talking about death, something that we all experience, something that people keep as a fear in the closet somewhere. So the passage goes something like this, Tadyata Rajanam, says, just as when the king wishes to depart, the fierce officers of justice punish offenses, and charioteers and villagers gather around him. All the senses gather around. At the time of his end, when the breath is going upwards, when the body becomes weak and senseless, senses gather together like tiny particles of light. These gather around the heart. And when sight turns away and returns back to its source, then not no color anymore. And when it becomes one with its source, it is said the eye does not see anymore. When it becomes one with its source, the nose does not smell anymore. And so on, goes on like that. Tongue, all the senses and so on, they don't do anymore. And then the top of the heart lights up, and through that lit up part, the self departs through the eye, the top of the head, or any of the other parts of the body. When the self departs, what happens? The prana, the energy, Still energy is there, but that also goes, it follows too, and when the prana departs, all the senses follow. All the senses follow. Then consciousness merges into consciousness, and skills, actions, and past knowledge all follow. Why do they follow? Now, the interesting thing, or a wonderful description, there's such a thing called a leech. Those people who live in tropical countries, rainforests, and so on and so forth, will have leeches clinging onto them. But the operation of a leech is there. You can also observe a caterpillar. The caterpillar doesn't jump from one leaf to the other. Just as a leech on a straw reaches the end of the straw, then takes over another one. No point in leaving this off unless you've got your foot on the other. Then takes over another one and attaches to it. So does this self, the immortal part, the one which is full already, throw aside the senseless body and attach itself to another body. There's no mystery about it. What is propelling it? All the desires are propelling it. All the king leaves with all his retinue. He still wants to carry on. And just as a goldsmith takes a measure of gold and shapes a new and beautiful form, so that self gets rid of the body. No point in living with a 1948 car. Try to get a 2020, 2021 model, a nice Tesla model, updated. Why not use that? So shapes and a new and beautiful form. So the self gets rid of the body that has been rendered senseless and creates a new and beautiful body, something that, if we have a mind to call it, we can call the earth car. In the same form as the ancestors, that is, all their wishes coming through, divine beings, illuminating factors that we unfortunately call gods, Lord of gods, Brahman, or other beings. That self is what? It's full. That self is called, it's indeed Brahman. And it doesn't require any other entity to make the web. Mr. Spider does not require a Mr. Spider to make the web. It's full in its own way, but is enveloped by the intellect, mind, prana, eyes, ears, earth, water, air, sky, light, dark, desire, aversion, anger, absence of anger, righteousness and non-righteousness, and everything. It's like a whole retinue around. Come, let us go this way. Let us go and enjoy this. Let us do this social activity here. Let us engage in eating and drinking there. Come. Surrounding this, a person is made of all that. Personality continues. What is a personality? It's a collection of impressions, habits, behaviors that say, come on, let us move forward. We want to be fulfilled. Let's try this, let's try that. Trial and error. But it's mostly error. That's the problem. A person is made of all that. As one does, as one acts, so does one become. He who does good deeds becomes good. He who does bad deeds becomes bad. One becomes good by good actions, bad by bad actions. They're the basis of morality. Morality is not a judgment that says, we'll punish you or we'll reward you. Whatever you think, whatever you do, whatever your unconscious behavior is, whatever your accumulation of experiences is, that will produce its effect because this whole universe runs on causality. You can't get away with it. What you put in is what you get out. It's a very simple thing. It's called a principle of sowing and reaping. Whatever you sow comes out, and you have to reap the consequences. Don't blame an unsuspecting God. Why is God so cruel to me? No, you made the sowing and you made the reaping. How is it that I find myself in this position, surrounded by all of this and not You say, I'm full and free and perfect. How is it I don't feel it? Well, because in the way, there are all these distractions. And when we follow the line that the rishis followed, that the saints and mystics go on and diligently do it, instead of being an armchair speculator or armchair philosopher, you say, we take this as a hypothesis. Now, if you treat it in any other scientific way to validate an experience, then you'll take it on as a hypothesis. And then you'll say, let me construct a model, a certain level of discipline, certain way of life that will promote goodness. Why goodness? Because goodness has the effect of purifying and clarifying the situation. If we don't find any fullness anywhere, it's because of our own confusion. We have taken this warp and woof and examined it in detail to find out what are the parts. Modern science itself is doing that, and they're not coming to any conclusion of a total theory of everything because they're looking at the parts. They're not looking at the totality. And what we call fullness is the totality. Knowing that we are dimensionally restricted, knowing that our information and interpretation will be necessarily limited, we look for a different way. We now say, let us now try to reform this subtle body. Let us try and change it in such a way that it will produce the conditions for a revelation of the fullness itself. So as he desires, so he plans, says the text. And as he plans, so he does. And he does, so he attains. It's a logical sequence. Then they quote the following shloka. Entangled in all this and subject to a causal law, a sowing and reaping called karma. You see, to avoid, I was saying yesterday to some people, it's much better to avoid standard mystical terms that have become part of common usage in today's world, because it creates a misunderstanding. That, oh, you have bad karma. What does that mean? So you replace the whole thing with, there's a principle of sowing and reaping. You understand that. What you put in a field and sow, you'll get it out. If you sow, if you put in the ground an oak seed, an oak tree seed, you'll get an oak tree. You won't get something of another species. The seed is there. That seed being there, the species will come. So we can determine what kind of seed we want to put there. He attains that goal on which his mind is focused. We have the capacity to attain anything that we choose because we have at our disposal only one mind. Don't forget, the highest generality of everything is the most truthful. Instead of thinking you have your mind or this mind, there's a mind there and there's a mind there and doing battle. This mind has parts, 12 parts. It can never be the ultimate. But there's one cosmic mind that has no parts. It is that mind that we are using. When we say, I think, all we're saying is, a current came, we call it thought, and we took that current, and with all this entangled view of things, we steered this energy here, there, and everywhere, and make it a disbursement. If we are to gather all that energy and beam it in one direction, then the truth is going to be revealed for us. It is fairly well known now that all the discoveries of modern science in this world were revealed to ancient rishis. All the various energetic aspects, kinetic energy, potential energy, radiation, electromagnetism, even nuclear forces, was known to the ancient people in their time. How is it that they were able to know these things? It was only through one tool that they had, the power of the mind, the power of focusing your attention on one particular thing until its secrets get revealed. Because its secrets seem to be outside something, but actually they're all within. And we have access to all of it, but we don't have the concentration. Well, concentration is a key thing. What is concentration? Concentration is a sense of the absence of time when consciousness is applied. So he attains to that goal on which his mind is focused when the results of his actions are exhausted. In other words, when you have no other perceived gaps within you, called desires, then he returns again from that world to this world and performs actions. This is about the one who has desires. So no, desires have absolutely gone, but when some have gone and some remain, you have to continue the journey. No, I didn't finish. You had breakfast? Yes, but before I could finish half of it, the body went. Next thing, I want to complete my breakfast. All right, here's a mouth, here's a body, and so on and so forth. So these verses about people normally feeling, I'm not fulfilled. I don't have fullness in me. He who is desireless, however, who does not desire anything, whose every desire has been fulfilled, because every desire is merged in what? In that fullness. Like the great Amazon river that becomes very brown, having gathered all the mighty silt from its experience, depositing itself in the sea and depositing its silt with it, entering into that vast ocean with all the silt left behind, merging in that oneness. His senses do not rise from him, and being that fullness that we call Brahman, he is absorbed into Brahman. He was always absorbed. He was always there. He was always there as the Atman, as the Gita describes it. He just realizes, I am full, I am free. So all of the spiritual life is about removing obstacles that muddy the mind. In Shankaracharya's language, there's a particular seed, a flocculent, naturally found, a nut. When you add it to water that has all kinds of debris within it, it tends to coagulate together, coalesces, and the weight of it sinks to the bottom. Today we use aluminum sulfate in water purification, same thing, a flocculent. And when all of that is nicely settled, a clarity of mind is there, and then we realize, I am the ocean. I was the ocean all along. The ocean is always full. I thought I was a wave. I thought I had to compete with other waves. And yet we are only experiencing that tiny peak of a wave, the crest of a wave, and thinking this is the whole of existence, and I can't find any fulfillment. I have to go along, and if this wave doesn't suit me, I'll find another wave until I find something suitable. And then the realization comes, I see, I'm the ocean itself. It's an aha moment. And that aha moment lasts. It never leaves. So it goes on. When all the desires are established in his heart, are gone, then he reaches immortality from mortality and attains this fullness that we call Brahman. Just as the lifeless skin of a snake is cast off and lies on an anthill, so does this body lie too. And when the self discards the body, it becomes the immortal energy, prana, the light of Brahman. That is, that entity whose presence energizes the rest, what we call our waking world. Indeed, it is so. And this is part of a conversation between, of course, King Janaka, who himself, or Videha, who himself was a rishi. But you see, even rishis will ask questions to verify their own wisdom and test Do you have the same wisdom as I have? And the reward, of course, for the good answers is in cows. But if you don't want to send us cows, you can send us money. So you can do that through our website if you like. The long, ancient, mysterious, illusory path has been touched by me, says the one who discovers it. By it, perseverant knowers of Brahman become liberated and rise to the world, other worlds. And it is known as interspersed with all these various elements. Basically, the three gunas is nature. But when you view it properly, you see a totality there also. Because we have a universe, never mind about theories of multiverse. If you have multiverses, you still have a universe, isn't it? Like saying you have different parts in the body, and each part is a universe. Actually, all the 700 trillion cells, whatever it is in the human body, they all operate independently, as it were. They all breathe by themselves, they all replicate by themselves, they all excrete by themselves, they all absorb by themselves. So what keeps them all together? What coordinates together? Supposing we're able to see this one cell and this wonderful complexity in the human body. Somebody sent me a picture yesterday or the other day. It is the first, most accurate graphic picture, coordinated picture of the internal of a living human cell, and you'd be astonished at its complexity. It's like a kind of abstract painting with so many details and interwoven structures. Wonderful machine, but the whole thing is missed when you study it. There's only one body. There's only one existence. There's only one verse which you call a universe. There's only one mind, only one energy, only one matter, looking and fragmented like all kinds of things. Bottom line, what we look out as the universe is nothing but that fragmented fullness, seemingly fragmented to our eyes, that wants to fragment it, to make sense of it, to relate to it, to fulfill our desires. And looking everywhere, where is the ocean? Where is the fullness? It's under your feet. All right, so we're pretty much there, near to 12 o'clock now. So thank you. As usual, I take another quick question if you have, before we close off.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you explain more on the Sukshma Sharir? It is the gospel, it is written there, Thakur said, Mon, Buddhi, Ahankar. These three make the Sukshma Sharir, which when we die, this leave the body and wait somewhere to find the next body.
So all of that I went through now?
Yes.
So that's like a leech?
No, you said that there are 12 components.
12 components,
Elaborate these 12 components for me, please.
So when you look at something, you're looking at with organic eyes made from molecules, made from yesterday's food. But you see, that's not just the only senses, because these are the external part of the senses. Internal part of the senses are the organs of the senses. What we call mind has got within it indriyas, as well as mind itself, what we call manasa, as well as buddhi, as well as ahankara. All of these are components of the mind. When Thakur was telling it, he's compressing it into beautifully into three components anyway, because the whole thing is summarized as ahankara. When we say I, we really mean personality. But when we are saying I, embodied I, we're attaching it to a body. When the body is not attached, only that I remains. So that I is a composition of all the psychological accumulations of desires and impressions. with an impetus to go forward. So in this Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it's compared to a king. King is your desires and moving forward, and all the party, all the attendants are coming with it. You can say that king is I. But the I obviously has desires. It wants to maintain its status because it has this feeling it wants to rule. If you use the analogy of a king, then the king wants to continue ruling. But of course, the intellect comes as a second best, trailing after it, because all of these desires are irrational. It's the emotion winning through. If you want to test it out, one of the easiest ways to upset the emotion as well, even all your reactions that you have, ask whether these reactions are emotionally based or rationally based. Emotionally based. Somebody praises you, then your ego becomes bigger. Somebody blames you, you shrink. What a pity. Next thing, anger. He wasn't making any common sense, so tomorrow I'll plan to put poison in his tea. I'll bring the ego along, the intellect along, and persuade it it's a good thing to do. And we have to reverse it. What scripture tells us is, please attend to the intellect first. Work out the principle of something. And then make sure that all the emotions buy into it, that we feel the truth of it. And the two together will provide you a thrust, a momentum that is irresistible. That's why in meditation, if you don't apply the emotions, it becomes shallow, becomes boring, and sleep sets in. All right. So I don't know if you heard the question, but you may have heard the answer anyway. All right, so thank you. And we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we finish off the Bhagavad Gita, of course, this afternoon. Swami Vimokshananda will review the Gospel of Ramakrishna in the afternoon. And happy Diwali to all of you. And those who celebrate and celebrated Kali Puja, happy Kali Puja there too. Greetings. And as you can see, the beautiful shrine here, that is part of a devotee's house, which has really become an ashram. So we thank those people who are involved in that and who are, in their own way, elevating the minds of themselves and others. Like Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.